Afternoon to all. This is Dr. Nisha Gautam. Today we are organizing a webinar on biostatistics, measures of diagnostic tests, specificity, sensitivity, PPV, NPV, and likelihood ratios. For today's talk, we have invited Dr. Saurabh Datta. Dr. Datta is professor in Division of Neonatology, Department of Pediatrics, PGI-MER, Chandigarh. He is also an adjunct faculty in the Pediatric Division of MC Master, University, Ontario, Canada. Now, I request Dr. Datta to deliver his talk and share his knowledge regarding biostatistical measures in diagnostic tests. So, please, Dr. Datta, if you can continue.
Hello, welcome, Saurabh. Hello.
Hello. Yeah,
Hello,
am I
welcome.
audible?
Yes, you audible.
I'll just try and share the screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Datta.
Which says diagnostic tests.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Is it now full screen?
Yes, Dr. Datta.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Meenu Singh, for your kind invitation and this opportunity to interact once again with the participants of this workshop. So this afternoon, I will be talking to you about diagnostic tests. Diagnostic tests are important because we as clinicians take diagnostic decisions far more often than therapeutic decisions. Diagnostic decisions, you take several times in a day on patients, because every time you're even asking an item in history or performing an item in physical examination, though of course we are hardly doing that in these COVID times, but otherwise, each time you're doing it, you're actually using the principles of diagnostic testing. So diagnostic tests are all about trying to evaluate an index test in comparison to a gold standard test. That is this whole gamut of diagnostic testing. So let's understand a few concepts first. The first concept is about tests and disease probability. On the left hand side is 0% probability of disease. On the right hand side is 100% probability of disease. When a patient comes to you for the first time, say someone comes to you in the OPD, or you're seeing the patient for the first time on the rounds, when you're evaluating a patient for the first time, there will be a constellation of signs and symptoms that the patient has. And that generally puts the patient in this mid zone, which is the zone of uncertainty. That means at first contact with the patient, you're still uncertain about the diagnosis. You have a few things going on in your mind as soon as you hear some items in history and examination, but you are never absolutely sure. On the right hand side of the zone of uncertainty is the zone of treatment. That means the probability of the disease has become so high that you think it is okay to empirically treat the patient. So note that the probability need not reach 100%. So quite often we start treatment for various diseases even when the probability is short of 100%. On the other hand, you have a zone of observation, the green zone. That means you think that the chances of the patient having the disease are so low out here that there's no point in further investigating for the disease, and you feel it's quite safe to just observe the patient. So the whole idea is, how do we get out from this zone of uncertainty into either the zone of treatment or the zone of observation, because we don't want to remain in a zone of uncertainty forever. So that means there are two thresholds to be crossed. If when the patient has come to you for the first time in the zone of uncertainty, there is a test treatment threshold that you're trying to cross, because you either want to treat the patient, or a test discharge threshold. That means you want to move away to the zone of observation, where you will no longer do any further testing on the patient, and you will simply observe. So before doing any test on the patient, before any laboratory test, radiological test, whatever test you're talking about, before doing any test, The probability of the disease, which is also known as the pre-test probability, is in this zone, the zone of uncertainty. And after doing the test, we want the probability of the disease, or in other words, the post-test probability, to be in either one of these zones, either the zone of treatment or the zone of observation. We do not want to remain in a zone of uncertainty. Let's take this concept a little further with a clinical example, this concept of pre-test probability and post-test probability. So imagine a patient comes to a doctor with cough, expectoration, and fever for 3 weeks and has some lymph nodes on examination. So here is the doctor, he's having a look at the patient. So the doctor, in his or her mind, makes a guesstimate of the probability of tuberculosis. And that guesstimate is based on two things. One is the prevalence of tuberculosis amongst all those who present similarly. That means all those who present with fever, cough, expectoration for 3 weeks, what is the probability of tuberculosis? And number two, this particular patient's clinical condition. So if the patient has lost a lot of weight, is looking emaciated, etc., has that look, then from experience, you grade up the probability of tuberculosis. If the patient is otherwise well preserved, then you grade down the probability of tuberculosis. But whatever it is, using these two things, the doctor makes a guesstimate of the probability of tuberculosis. This is known as the pre-test probability of tuberculosis. We have not done any tests so far. So this is the pre-test probability. The doctor now gets a test done. For example, say a chest X-ray. A chest X-ray is done. Now the chest X-ray may turn out to be either positive, like the top X-ray, or the test may turn out to be negative. That means a normal X-ray at the bottom. If the test is positive, the next question the doctor asks is, now what do I think is the probability the patient has tuberculosis? That means I had the pre-test probability, I did a test, the test is positive. Now, what is the probability the patient has tuberculosis? On the other hand, if the test is negative, then the doctor again asks himself or herself that, okay, there was a certain pre-test probability, but now that the test is negative, what is the revised probability that the patient has tuberculosis? So this revised probability after the test result is available is known as the post-test probability. So the post-test probability of tuberculosis. Having ascertained the post-test probability, the next question to be asked is the probability of tuberculosis high enough that the doctor can start treatment based on this probability, or is the doctor still uncertain based on the post-test probability of a positive test? Or on the other hand, is the probability of tuberculosis low enough that the doctor need not investigate any further, or is the doctor still uncertain? So at the end of a positive test and a negative test, the question that you're really asking is the probability high enough that I can start treatment? Or on the other hand, is the probability so low that I don't even need to investigate any further? Or am I still uncertain? Okay, so how do you decide all these thresholds? The test treatment threshold, for instance. So these are just some rules of thumb, that if the disease is rare, if the progression of the disease is slow, if immediate fatality is less, if treatment has a lot of side effects, if the treatment duration is long, the cost is high, and the consequences of over treating are very bad, then you will have a high test treatment threshold. That means you'll have a high threshold for starting treatment. Typical example, cancer chemotherapy. Most oncologists will not start chemotherapy unless they're almost above 95% or 99% sure that the patient has the malignancy. On the other hand, if the disease is common, progression is rapid, immediate fatality is high, therapy has relatively less side effects, treatment duration is short, cost is low, and therefore the consequences of over treatment are not so bad, then you would tend to have a low threshold for treatment. Typical example is neonatal sepsis. Progression is rapid, fatality is high, and the therapy has relatively less side effects. So neonatologists tend to have a lower threshold for treating neonatal sepsis than what an oncologist would have for treating cancer. So depending on the context, the threshold is decided. There is no fixed rule that this should be the threshold. So we're talking about risk versus benefit, coming back to that same diagram. Suppose for a particular disease, disease X, we say that our test treatment threshold is 80% and test discharge threshold is 10%. What are we saying in effect? We are saying that we think the consequences of over treating up to 10% subjects is acceptable since 80% or more are going to benefit from treatment. So at 80% threshold, you will be over treating 20% subjects, but that's okay because you think over treating 20% is okay for this disease because I know 80% are benefiting from correct treatment. On the other hand, what is the meaning of a 10% threshold for test discharge? You think the consequences of under treating up to 10% subjects is acceptable since 90% or more are benefiting from no unnecessary treatment. So you have to mentally put these markers depending on the nature of the disease. Is it a disease where it is okay to not treat a certain proportion? Nothing is going to happen to them. No catastrophe is going to happen because I think the vast majority, 90%, are benefiting from not being treated unnecessarily and being exposed to treatment, right? So these are the questions that you're asking yourself. So there are basically two types of tests. Those which have inherently binary results. That means it is in the very nature of the test that it is either positive or negative. For example, ultrasound head for intraventricular hemorrhage in neonates. So either there is or there is no IVH, or blood culture for sepsis. So either it is positive or it is sterile. You can't have something in between. Cytopathology, either there's cancer or no cancer. But on the other hand, you have test results which are inherently continuous, but a man-made cutoff decides whether it is positive or negative. So as I said, this cutoff is man-made and could actually change with time with better understanding of the disease. And sometimes there may not be even any consensus regarding the cutoff. So different groups may adopt different cutoffs. And this is actually very common in clinical practice, such kind of tests. For example, a CRP of greater than 10 milligrams per liter is considered to be a positive CRP based on whatever literature we have so far. A sodium of above 150 is considered to be a high sodium, hypernatremia. So there's a cutoff that is deciding what is considered to be abnormal. Let's take an example to understand sensitivity, specificity, and predictive values. Let's start with 100 infants with suspected sepsis. And what do we mean by suspected sepsis? Say they are all febrile, tachycardic, and tachypneic. So there are 100. So each of these dots represents one infant. There are 10 rows and 10 columns. So there are a total of 100 such dots out here. Now let us suppose our gold standard is blood culture. And the test that we are interested in is CRP. And here we are taking CRP as a binary test. That means it is either positive or it's negative. Positive as defined by more than 10 milligrams per liter, negative less than 10 milligrams per liter. So it's either positive or it's negative. We are not interested in the actual value of the CRP for a given patient. Okay, so a certain proportion of such patients would end up being culture positive. That means truly diseased. Out of these 100 who present with fever, tachycardia, tachypnea, a certain proportion will end up being culture positive. They are the ones who are truly diseased because we are saying our gold standard is blood culture. So the red ones are all culture positive. Putting them all together on one side, it means that the prevalence of the disease, that means sepsis, or in other words, the pre-test probability is 40% because 4 rows and 10 columns. So it's 40%. Why pre-test probability? Because we haven't even done the test. We haven't even done CRP yet. We just know that whenever 100 such kids present with these kind of features, the prevalence of sepsis amongst them is 40%. So that's the pre-test probability. That's our prior knowledge. No sepsis is 60%. Now we are going to do our test on these 100 patients. So this was sepsis. This was no sepsis from the previous slide. Now we do our test CRP and it is positive in the following patients, the one that have the hatched circles. So notice something interesting, that not all patients with sepsis had a positive CRP. Most of them had, but not all. See, all of them did not get hatched. And amongst those who are non-septic, a few actually were test positive, CRP positive, green hatched circles. And that happens in real life because tests are not perfect. They don't exactly match the gold standard. Test negative, that means CRP negative, are dotted circles. So that means a few amongst the sepsis gold standard positive, blood culture positive, actually had negative CRPs. And the vast majority of non-septic expectedly had a negative CRP. Okay. Now, this group, the top left, are the test true positives. That means that test has truly come positive. They were supposed to be positive. That means they were septic and it has turned out to be positive, CRP positive. So test true positives. On the bottom right, you have the test true negatives. So the CRP was not supposed to be positive. It is supposed to be negative in them because they were non-septic and it was indeed negative. So test true negatives. The other two boxes are the problematic ones. So on the top right, you have the test false negatives. That means the CRP was false negative amongst them. It was supposed to have been positive because they are septic, but it turned out to be false negative. And at the bottom left, you have the test false positives. That means the CRP had no business to be positive because they were all non-septic, the green ones, and yet the test turned out to be positive. So it was a test false positive. So what is sensitivity? Sensitivity is amongst those who are truly diseased. That means the truly diseased is at the bottom in the denominator. Amongst those who are truly diseased, what proportion are test true positives? The true positive tests amongst those who are truly diseased. So the CRP positives divided by all those who are blood culture positive. So in this case, it was 32 circles divided by 40 circles, which is 80%. It is also known as the true positive rate of the test. And in simple English, sensitivity answers the question, what proportion of diseased patients have a positive test? What proportion of diseased patients, disease are the denominator, what proportion of them has a positive test? So what is 1 minus sensitivity? That is the false negatives divided by the diseased. So in this case, it would be 8 divided by 40, which is 20%. So that's the same as 100% minus 80% because 80% was the sensitivity. So 1 minus sensitivity is 20%. So the false negatives divided by the diseased. This is also known as the false negative rate of the test. Moving on to specificity. In specificity, the denominator are the non-diseased individuals, non-diseased. Amongst them, how many were test true negative? That means amongst those who did not have sepsis, how many were CRP negative? Which in this case happens to be 42 divided by 60 because there are 6 rows and 10 columns here. So 42 by 60, which is 70%. It is also known as the true negative rate of the test. And in simple English, specificity answers the question, what proportion of non-diseased patients have a negative test? That means amongst those who are not diseased, what proportion will have a negative test? That is specificity. So what is 1 minus specificity? That's the reverse of that. So the denominator remains the same, the non-diseased 60. The numerator now becomes the false positives. So the false positives divided by the non-diseased, which in this case is 18 by 60 or 30%, which you would recollect 70% was the specificity. So this is 100 minus 70. So that's 30%. It may also be called the false positive rate of the test, 1 minus specificity, false positive rate. Okay, now changing gears and going to predictive value. So what is positive predictive value? Positive predictive value is the denominator are all test positives. So amongst those who test positive for CRP, the numerator is true test positives. That means how many are actually blood culture positive? That's the numerator. So amongst those who are CRP positive, how many will turn out to be blood culture positive? So in this case, the denominator is 50, the numerator is 32, the test true positive, so that is 64%. This is also known as the post-test probability of the test. Okay, So in simple English, positive predictive value answers the question, what proportion of patients with a positive test are diseased? See, this is different from sensitivity. In sensitivity, it is what proportion of diseased patients have a positive test. Now we are asking of what proportion of patients with a positive test will turn out to be diseased. Okay. And that is 64%. Just remember this figure 64% because we're going to talk about it later again. What is negative predictive value? Negative predictive value is the denominator are all test negatives, all those who are CRP negative. Amongst them, how many are true negatives? That means how many really do not have sepsis, are blood culture negative. So this is 42 by 50, which happens to be 84%. And in simple English, negative predictive value answers the question, what proportion of patients who come to you with a negative test are actually not diseased? That means they've come with a CRP which is negative. How sure are you that they do not have sepsis? That means their blood culture is negative. What proportion of patients coming to you with a negative test are truly non-diseased? It's very similar to some decisions that you take in your day-to-day life. For example, buying an apple. So when you're buying an apple, what is the gold standard? The gold standard is the flavor of the apple, which is inside the apple. So at the time when you're buying the apple, you do not have access to the gold standard, right? What you have access to are the diagnostic tests, the color of the apple, the shininess, the appearance, its texture. When you feel it, it's not sort of softened from one side and so on. So these are the diagnostic tests. And you are interested in buying apples with a good flavor, which are crunchy, sweet, and have a good flavor. That is the gold standard, which is inside the apple. Now the question is, which of these questions will provide the more useful answer at the time of buying the apple? Number one, of all apples with a good flavor, how many have a red skin? Or number two, of all apples with a red skin, how many will have a good flavor? So when you're buying the apple, it is the second question which is more important, because you want to know out of all apples who have a red skin, how many will end up having a good flavor. There is no point in knowing once you have a good flavor, how many had a red skin. That is useless because you now already know that the flavor is good, right? So the top question is actually sensitivity. That means amongst those who are gold standard positive, how many are test positive? That is sensitivity. The second is positive predictive value. That means of all those who have a test positive, that means the red skin, what proportion will turn out to be gold standard positive? So that is positive predictive value. So you've understood that when you have to take a decision, it is the positive predictive value or positive or negative predictive value, which is more useful than sensitivity and specificity. So what is the first big myth of diagnostic tests? What have we learned? The first big myth is that we think that sensitivity and specificity are useful to the clinician who's trying to arrive at a diagnosis. No, they're not. The reality is that sensitivity and specificity assume that the gold standard status of the patient is already known. It is predictive values which give an idea of the post-test probability of the disease, which are actually more useful than sensitivity and specificity. Okay, now let us imagine that we have moved to another population. So we have moved to a population where 60% of those with suspected sepsis are blood culture positive. That means they're truly diseased. See, the first population we dealt with, only 40% were blood culture positive. Let us go to another country, another setting or whatever, where out of every 100 infants who present with fever, tachycardia and tachypnea, it turns out that 60% of these turn out to be culture positives. Okay, means the prevalence of sepsis is very high in this population. So prevalence or the pre-test probability is 60% in this population. So no sepsis is 40%. Okay, now it has been demonstrated through studies that sensitivity and specificity are similar across populations. So let us keep the sensitivity and specificity the same, 80% and 70%. So that means out of all my red diseased, 80% circles would now become hatched. 80% will become hatched because my sensitivity has to be 80%. Amongst my green circles, the non-diseased, 70% will be dotted because my specificity is 70%. So that means CRP negative would be 70% of these green dots. And the rest will be filled up accordingly. So on the top right, the remainder will be dotted red circles. On the bottom left, the remainder would be hatched green circles. So this is now what I have in my second population. So what happens to the positive predictive value? So amongst those who are test positive, what proportion are truly diseased? I do the same exercise. It turns out now that it is 48 by 60, which is 80%. And if you remember what the positive predictive value was from the first example, the previous population positive predictive value was only 64%. So the positive predictive value has gone up. So what is the moral of the story? It is that as the prevalence of the disease increases, the positive predictive value of the test increases. So the positive predictive value of a test is not a constant. It doesn't remain the same across populations. It depends upon the prevalence of the disease in that population. What happens to negative predictive value? So I now take this new population. The test negatives are in the denominator. The true negatives are in the numerator. 28 by 40, 28 circles by 40 circles, which is 70%. Remember, in the previous population, negative predictive value was 84%. So it has dropped now in this population. So what did we learn? As the prevalence of the disease increases, the negative predictive value of the test decreases. So the second big myth of diagnostic tests is that we can simply get the positive and negative predictive value of a test derived from another setting, and we can start using it the very next day in our own setting. No, you can't, because your prevalence is different from the prevalence in the other country where the study was originally done. So what is the reality? The reality is that positive predictive value and negative predictive value change depending upon disease prevalence. As the prevalence of the disease increases, positive predictive value increases and negative predictive value decreases, and vice versa. As the prevalence decreases, the positive predictive value decreases and the negative predictive value increases. Just to take a few light-hearted examples. So if Saurabh's Mantoux test is positive, he is more likely to have tuberculosis than if Barack Obama's Mantoux test is positive. Mantoux test done in exactly the same way, same amount of antigen, interpreted in exactly the same way, and yet the probability is different. Why? Because tuberculosis is more prevalent in India than what it is in the USA. So a person with a Mantoux test positive in India is more likely to have tuberculosis than a person with a Mantoux test positive in the USA, simply because the prevalence of the disease is more in India. The test is the same, but its interpretation becomes completely different depending on the country you're in. If Donald Trump's sweat chloride test is positive, I should have changed that to Joe Biden, he is more likely to have cystic fibrosis than if Narendra Modi's sweat chloride test is positive. Sweat chloride done in exactly the same way. Cutoff is exactly the same. And yet, if a Caucasian has a positive sweat chloride, that person is more likely to have cystic fibrosis than if someone from the Indian subcontinent has a sweat chloride positive, because of the difference in the prevalence of the disease. C-reactive protein for sepsis has a higher negative predictive value in a community setting than what it has in the PGI neonatal intensive care unit. So suppose two kids present with exactly the same signs and symptoms. Both have fever, tachycardia, tachypnea. One is in a community setting, one is in PGI. The PGI kid is far more, and the CRP is negative. In the community, you are far more sure that this is not sepsis. In the PGI NICU, you can't be that sure that the patient does not have sepsis. Why? Because the prevalence of sepsis is much more in the PGI NICU than what it is in a community setting. Okay, so now you will say, well, you've put us in a real dilemma. You're saying that sensitivity, specificity is not useful for a clinician to make a diagnosis. Predictive values are useful. And then on the other hand, you're saying that predictive values go on changing from setting to setting depending on the prevalence. So how to go, what is the way out of the dilemma? The way out of the dilemma is something known as likelihood ratio. So likelihood ratio is a term that is used in diagnostic testing. The likelihood ratio of a positive test, the shorthand for that is LR plus, is the probability of the test being positive amongst the diseased in the numerator divided by the probability of the test being positive amongst the non-diseased. The numerator you would quickly recognize is sensitivity. Amongst the disease, what proportion is test positive is sensitivity, right? The true positive rate of the test, sensitivity. The denominator is the false positive rate of the test, or 1 minus specificity. That means amongst the non-diseased, what is the probability the test is positive? So this is sensitivity divided by 1 minus specificity, which is nothing but the true positive rate of the test divided by the false positive rate of the test, is the likelihood ratio of a positive test. Now, you want tests which have a very high true positive rate and a very low false positive rate. That means a big numerator and a small denominator. So in other words, you want likelihood ratios of a positive test to be very high. So a likelihood ratio of a positive test, if it's more than 10, it is an excellent test. More than 5, it is a good test. The closer the likelihood ratio is to 1, the worse the test is. Okay, now let's look at likelihood ratio of a negative test. So likelihood ratio of a negative test in the numerator is probability of the test being negative amongst the diseased divided by the probability of the test being negative amongst the non-diseased. So the denominator is simple, it is specificity, because amongst those who are non-diseased, who are gold standard negative, what proportion are test negative? So that is specificity, denominator. Numerator is 1 minus sensitivity, or the false negative rate of the test. That means amongst those who are diseased, how many are test negative? That is the false negative rate. So it is the false negative rate divided by the true negative rate of the test. Now you obviously want for a good test to have a very high true negative rate in the denominator and a very small false negative rate in the numerator. So that means you want a likelihood ratio of a negative test to be as small as possible. That means as less than 1 as possible. Right? So likelihood ratio of a negative test which is less than 0.1 is an excellent test because it enables you to rule out the disease. Okay, so likelihood ratio sounds complicated, but actually it is just a fancy way to convert pre-test probability into post-test probability. Now let's look at the left side of this slide. So the pre-test probability, from where do you get it? Is from the prior knowledge of prevalence. That means what is the culture positive sepsis rate amongst all suspects, prior knowledge, and the clinical assessment of the patient in front of you. So you say suppose it's around 40% pre-test probability. You now do the test, you get the post-test probability Can you enable screen sharing for me? It's saying host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Sir, we have made you the co-host. You can share your slide.
Yeah. So as I was saying, you will have one pre-test probability, but depending on whether it's a positive test or a negative test, there are two possible post-test probabilities. One for a positive test, one for a negative test. Likelihood ratio of a positive test enables this conversion from 40% to 60%. Likelihood ratio of a negative test enables this conversion, the 40% to 20%. And I'll show you how that is done. So the likelihood ratio is in our study. Remember, sensitivity was 80%, specificity was 70% for our CRP. So likelihood ratio of a positive test is sensitivity upon 1 minus specificity, which I worked it out for you. It works out to be 2.66. And let's just round it off to ease of calculation. Likelihood ratio of a negative test was 1 minus sensitivity upon specificity, which is 0.28. And let's just round it off to 0.3 for ease of calculation. Okay, so let's say LR positive for our CRP is 3, LR negative for CRP is 0.3. Okay, so this is the famous Fagan's nomogram. So somebody called Fagan published this famous nomogram that goes after his name in the NEJM, I think somewhere in the 1970s or 80s. What does this nomogram consist of? So there are three vertical lines. The first vertical line on the left-hand side is pre-test probability. So which extends from 0.1% up to 99% at the bottom. The middle vertical line is the likelihood ratio, going from way below 1, that means 0.001, up to way above 1, that means 1000. And right in the middle is the figure 1. On the right hand side is the post-test probability, which is a mirror image of the pre-test probability. It goes from 0.1 at the bottom, 0.1%, by the way, these are all percent, going up to 99% at the top. Now let us imagine we are dealing with CRP, the little orange box on the top left, whose likelihood ratio of a positive test is 3, likelihood ratio of a negative test is 0.3. Now let's take some actual clinical scenarios. So supposing we're dealing with sepsis, and we say that we're going to put these two thresholds mentally. There's a threshold at the 50% mark between the zone of uncertainty where we'll be doing more tests and the zone of treatment where you will not do any further tests. You will say that, okay, this is good enough for me to start treatment. So suppose you tell yourself that, okay, at the 50% mark, if it crosses 50%, I will start treatment. So that is my test treatment threshold. The other threshold is at 2%. That is between the zone of uncertainty, that means the yellow part, and the zone of observation. That means if it drops to less than 2%, I will say, no, sepsis doesn't seem to be very likely. I am not going to do any further tests. The chances of sepsis are too remote. I'm just going to observe this kid. Right. So that's with pre-test probability, and exactly the same has been done on the other side with post-test probability. The same thresholds, 2% and 50%. Okay. Now imagine we have a patient who is moderately sick. This blue thing on the left-hand side, moderately sick patient. And we make a guesstimate that probability of sepsis is around 30%. The 30% chances this kid has sepsis. So the pre-test probability is 30%, moderately sick patient. Maybe has had few, apnea, some abdominal distension, feed intolerance, and so on, moderately sick. So if we do a CRP and the CRP turns out to be positive, it has a likelihood ratio of 3, right? So I will see where 3 is on this likelihood ratio line, and then I will draw a line connecting 30 with 3 and extend the line to see where it cuts the post-test probability line. Fagan has already done all the calculation and made this easy nomogram for us to directly read off. So we don't have to make any mathematical calculations. So you start with the pretest probability. The line goes through the likelihood ratio of CRP, say, suppose the likelihood ratio is 3, and then it cuts the post-test probability line at 60%. 60% is in my zone of treatment because it is above 50%. So I will treat this patient if CRP is positive. That means a moderately sick patient whose CRP is positive, I will treat because the post-test probability is 60%, which is in my zone of treatment. On the other hand, if the CRP had turned out to be negative in this moderately sick patient, the likelihood ratio was 0.3. So see, I've drawn a line connecting 30 with 0.3, extended it to see where it cuts the post-test probability line. The post-test probability is 10%. That means although my CRP is negative, there is still a 10% probability that this patient has sepsis. This 10% probability is above 2%, which was my threshold for not investigating any further and simply observing. So this falls in my zone of uncertainty. I'm still in a zone of uncertainty. I was in a zone of uncertainty even earlier. I'm in a zone of uncertainty even now after having done the test. I will still have to do more tests to really rule out sepsis. So that means just a negative CRP is not good enough. I have to do more tests. If my CRP is negative in somebody who's moderately sick, CRP has not enabled me to come out of the zone of uncertainty. Okay. Now let's take somebody who is just mildly sick, this purple patient on the left-hand side, whose pre-test probability is only 5%. So I go on the rounds, I see this patient who is, say, a late preterm, not very preterm, who just had one apnea, didn't tolerate one feed, otherwise is looking fine, just mildly sick. And I say that, okay, the probability of this baby being septic is just about 5%. I do a CRP. My CRP, if it comes positive, that means I now connect the 5 with the 3 likelihood ratio, and that cuts the post-test probability at somewhere around 15%. That now still leaves me in a zone of uncertainty. I have to do more tests, even though the CRP is positive. Even though the CRP is positive, I'm still in a zone of uncertainty, somewhere between 2 to 50%, where I don't know whether I should definitely treat or definitely not treat. Whereas if the CRP was negative, see, if the lower purple line is now crossing 0.3 likelihood ratio, that crosses post-test probability at about 1.5%. 1.5% is below 2%. I am now reasonably sure that this patient does not have sepsis. I will simply observe. I will do no further testing. So that means the interpretation of the test depended on the pre-test probability. The test remained the same. Now, supposing I am dealing with a much more sick patient. So patient has gone into shock, is bleeding from here and there, is looking really sick to me on the rounds. And I say the pre-test probability is 45%. You know, the 45% chance this kid is sick. I do a CRP, the test is positive, the post-test probability is 75%. So I will treat if the CRP is positive, no confusion about that. If the test is negative, CRP is negative, it crosses through 0.3, it is touching the post-test probability line at about 18%, which is still in my zone of uncertainty. So although test is negative, I'm still not sure that the patient does not have sepsis. He could very well be having sepsis. So I will have to do more tests if I want to be sure. Now let us take another test. Supposing it is not C-reactive protein that we are taking. Supposing we are dealing with procalcitonin, which is another inflammatory biomarker and reputed to be better than CRP. And supposing from the sensitivity and specificity of CRP, I calculated that its LR positive is 20 and LR minus is 0.02, unlike CRP, which was 3 and 0.3 respectively. Supposing for PCT, procalcitonin, it is 20 and 0.02 respectively. Okay. So what happened to my blue patient? My blue patient who was moderately sick with a pretest probability of 30%, I do a procalcitonin, it is positive. So the top blue line goes now from 30 via 20 and crosses it at about 92.5% post-test probability. I will definitely treat. If the PCT is negative From 30, it goes via 0.02 and now crosses the post-test probability line at about 0.75%, which is way below 2%, way below the threshold at which I will not treat. So I will not treat this patient. No antibiotics, simply observe. So my decision is very clear. If my procalcitonin came positive, I will give antibiotics. Came negative, I will do no further testing, no antibiotics. Great. Now let's look at the purple patient. The one who was less sick, had a low pretest probability, only 5%. Procal positive goes via 20, cuts the post-test probability line at 60%. I will definitely treat. Procal negative goes via 0.02, cuts the post-test probability line at 0.1%. I will definitely not treat. Orange patient, very sick. I start off at 45% pretest probability. Procal positive, it goes via 20 likelihood ratio, cut post-test probability at 95%. I will definitely treat. Procal negative, it goes via 0.02, cuts the post-test probability line at about 1.2%. I will definitely not treat. So have you seen the difference between CRP and procalcitonin? In procalcitonin, after doing the test, you are not left in the limbo. You're not left in a zone of uncertainty, having to do more tests. With procalcitonin, with its very impressive likelihood ratios, both positive and negative, a positive test guarantees that you should be treating this patient. A negative test, you should definitely not be treating and do no further testing. So this likelihood ratio in this manner allows you to calculate post-test probabilities and take therapeutic decisions whether to treat or not to treat. So that means regardless of the pre-test probability, the procalcitonin post-test probability does not leave us in a limbo. So therefore it's a superior test to CRP because its likelihood ratios are far better than CRP. So back to tests and disease probability. So a test must have a positive likelihood ratio that enables you to make this jump if the test turns out to be positive. That means from zone of uncertainty to zone of treatment. And clearly a negative likelihood ratio that enables you to make this jump if the test turns out to be negative. That is what is called a good test. So if you can't make the jump, you need to do other tests serially till you exit the zone of uncertainty. Okay, so with that, I'm going to bring this presentation to a close and I'll be quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Dear Dr. Datta, I thank you for the valuable, informative, and influential talk regarding the statistical measures and methods for treatment decision making and making us familiar with the important terms like post and pre and uncertainty probability of test and the measurement or the parameters like sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value and negative predictive value, and the other factors that influence the PPV and NPV like prevalence of the disease. Further, the likelihood ratio, which also based on the PPV and NPV value. I also thank you for sharing the Fagan plot analysis and evaluation with clinical utility. I thank you very much. We are having certain questions. So, do we have questions? So I request participants kindly turn on their videos and post the questions. One can type the questions. Or you can also ask directly. So there is one question from Debasis Ray. How to determine the pre-test probability, sir?
Yeah, so the pre-test probability is if you already have a publication, of that kind. That means a population-based or a hospital-based publication, which says that amongst patients who present with these kind of constellations of signs and symptoms, so many have this disease. Like the example I gave you for tuberculosis, it has been very well worked out That means amongst those who present with, fever, cough for whatever 2 weeks or 3 weeks, this is the number percentage who have tuberculosis. So that gives you the pretest probability. So look for similar publications in that field that will give you the pretest probability. If you don't have publications like that, then you try and use your unit data. So if you have been collecting data, for some time, for years, or you then get to know what is the pretest probability of a disease. For instance, in PGI, we have a reasonably good idea of what is the pretest probability of sepsis in neonates who are sick looking, because we have done so many studies and so on in sick looking neonates that we know the figure is somewhere around 20 to 25%. That's a pretest probability in the PGI NICU for sepsis, right? If you don't have either of these two pieces of information, then it just becomes an intelligent guess from your clinical experience. So you could say on the rounds, ask, maybe 4 or 5 of you on the rounds, just take a consensus opinion. Okay, what does everyone think? From our experience, what is the probability that the patient has this disease? That becomes your rough pretest probability. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there is another question from Mr. Ashok Kumar, that how to compare two sensitivities.
Oh, that's pretty simple. So sensitivity is amongst those who are gold standard positive, right? So amongst those who are gold standard positive, what proportion is test positive? So in sensitivity, you are not interested in those who are gold standard negative. So they are straight away out of your sample, right? So supposing you have, say, 1,000, total sample size is 1,000, out of which 100 are gold standard positive for certain disease and 900 are gold standard negative. So in the sensitivity calculation, the 900 you're not interested in. You're interested only in the 100, the gold standard positive. Amongst them, how many are test positive? Correct? So amongst those 100, there are two tests that you did. Say, suppose I did CRP and I did procalcitonin, both amongst those 100 who are all culture positives. Certain proportion are CRP positive, certain proportion are procalcitonin positive. So now it has boiled down to a comparison of two proportions. The proportion that was CRP positive versus the proportion that is procalcitonin positive amongst all those who are blood culture positive. Correct? So had these been two different groups, two different sets of patients with blood culture positive, this would have been a simple chi-square test. A chi-square test would have sorted out whether whose sensitivity is better, statistically significantly. But because it is within the same group of blood culture positives, you are doing sensitivity of CRP versus sensitivity of procalcitonin. You use a modification of the chi-square test known as the McNemar's test. McNemar's test is for related groups. So because the CRP and the procal are both being compared within the same group, these are related groups. So you use McNemar's test, which is a derivative of the chi-square test, to compare sensitivity between two tests. That's the answer.
Okay, so sir, my question is whether this McNemar P test, evaluate this test by observing their P value, right?
Yes, there is a p-value that will be
Okay.
generated.
So Mr. Ashok Kumar, I hope you get your answer of your second question. Oh yes, thank you, sir. So there is another question from Dr. Minakshi Sachdeva. Does the sensitivity of a diagnostic test remain same or constant across different populations?
It is believed to remain the same.
Okay. Is there any question? So, thank you, Dr. Datta. Thank you for such influential and valuable talk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.